Before we dive into the code, there is one topic I would like to talk a bit more about, and that is linting. This and the next lesson are optional. So, if you don't want to or you feel uncomfortable linting your application, you can safely skip them. A linter is a utility software that programmatically reviews an application and reports suspicious code to the author. As a result, it reduces bugs and increases the quality and consistency of your code. There will be times when linting will annoy you to death, but linting will also save your future ass from deploying a horrible bug with a potential catastrophic consequence. In this lesson, we will talk about the JavaScript linter ESLint and some general pros and cons to get you familiarized with the subject. In a nutshell, ESLint checks your code and yells at you every time it notices a mistake. To get started, let's take a look at how ESLint works. There is an online demo where we can check it out. I will paste some code here that technically works and see the error messages on the right. The first thing we see is a parsing error. The keyword const is reserved. That's because const comes in ES6 and ESLint is not aware that we are using ES6. Let's take a look at the configuration. The first option is ECMA version, so let's switch that to 6. ECMAScript 6 is also called ECMAScript 2015. Now the parsing error went away, and we get a handful of linting errors. The first error, for instance, says that the name variable is assigned to a value but never used. This error is coming from the no one used vars rule. If you open that rule in a new tab, you can see a lot of information about it. You can configure ESLint based on your needs, and you can find all the rules and explanations on the ESLint website. Luckily, you don't need to choose all the settings and rules you want on your own because there are standard sets of rules available. A set of rules is called a preset. There is a preset provided by the ESLint organization called ESLint Recommended, and it includes all the rules that have this checkmark on the left. Okay, but we don't want to paste our code directly on eslint.org every time we want to lint it. Of course, we can install and run ESLint locally. For now, let's see how we use ESLint in our project. The three popular ways of using ESLint are via the command line, integrated in your code editor, and as a loader in Webpack. I find the first option to slow my workflow. And while I like to have ESLint integrated into my editor, I prefer to also use a Webpack loader to ensure that I don't miss anything. As you might have heard, it is pretty easy to integrate ESLint with the Vue CLI. In fact, our Vue CLI project comes with ESLint installed by default. I have opened our newly created project in my IDE, that is WebStorm. If you open your package.json file and look for ESLint, you will see that our Vue 3 application also comes with some configuration for ESLint. This configuration lives under the ESLint config option. The pieces that you will most likely need to change, if you have specific requirements, are the extends option and the rules. Extends is an array of the active presets, also known as collections of rules. As you see here, by default, our application extends the ESLint recommended preset that activates all the rules we saw on the ESLint website that had the checkmark on the left. Notice here that our application also extends the plugin Vue 3 Essential, that is a collection of rules specific to Vue.js code. You can review these rules on the official Vue ESLint plugin website. I will put the link in the description of this lesson. If you decide to use another preset after some time, that's fine, you can come in here and change these values. But be aware that you will also have to install the new preset. The rules option includes a list of rules that you want to adjust. When you're working with a preset, your rules will override the preset's rules. One thing that I usually need during development is to define variables that I don't use. The ESLint recommended preset doesn't allow that. In order to disable this rule, I will add a new property with a rule name, and then I can set it to off. What I need here is the name of the rule. When working with ESLint, it is easy to find the name of the rule that you want to alter, since it is always provided along with the error. Let's define an unused variable within app view to see what happens. In the browser, we now get an error coming from ESLint. Here we can see the name of the rule. You can then adjust it in your project settings or search for it on the ESLint documentation to learn more. Before disabling a rule, make sure to check this page on eslint.org to see why this rule applies and make sure that you really want to disable it. If you can't find the link for a rule, you can always browse the list of available rules or use the search. Back to our configuration file. The name of the rule I want to disable is no unused vars. Each rule has 3 states: error, warn, and off. If I want to disable it, I will set it to off. Since it is nice to see a warning to remind me that I might have forgotten an unused variable somewhere, I prefer to get a warning. Instead of the state names, we could also use the integer equivalents, which are 2 for error, 1 for warn, and 0 for off. I will set it to 1 for warn. Let's check again in the browser, but first we have to restart the development server in order for our changes to take effect. We now get the warning in our terminal. But in the browser, we don't get the overlay that's breaking the application anymore. That's great. Accordingly, if I set the rules value to 0, we won't see any warnings. Actually, I like to have unused variables during development, but I want to keep my code clean for production. So, I can set the rules value conditionally. If the application is being built for production, I want this rules value to be error. But if it's being built for development, I want it to be a warning. Sadly, this would not work inside the JSON file because it is not valid JSON syntax. What we can do to implement that is to use a dedicated configuration file. If you want to have the ESLint configuration options in their own file, you can create a file called eslint.rc.jes in the root directory of your project. Don't forget to add the starting dot here. ESLint will automatically pick up the settings from the ESLint.rc file. I will move our linting rules and settings from package.json in here. As this is a JavaScript file, we need to export our configuration object. And that should do the trick. By the way, don't worry if this part of the code doesn't look familiar. You could easily find this condition on your own if you googled for something like different ESLint rules based on environment. Ta-da! Okay, now running npm run serve works just fine, but npm run build will fail because the no unused vars rule is not followed. When you configure your own rules, you should try as hard as possible to learn and adapt to the presets rules you are using instead of immediately disabling every rule you don't follow.